The outgoing BMW X5 was a perfectly well-rounded SUV. It was a nice SUV. Nice in the way that someone tells you you're nice before you get dumped. It wasn't particularly exciting, and it didn't have any real standout luxury features. And since 2016, Volvo has reset the benchmark for what this class should be. Simply being a nice luxury SUV is no longer good enough. Enter the 2019 BMW X5. Redesigned, and we're driving it at BMW's media introduction in the Atlanta area to see if all the new goods BMW added with this new car take it to that next level. The 2019 may not look very different than the 2018, but here are some key differentiators. The front kidney grills are longer, wider, much larger than before, and you have these optional freaking laser beam headlights. You can tell them because they have the blue inserts, and also it says BMW laser right there. In the back, there's a much more noticeable change, and it's with the taillights. Instead of short and stocky, they are wide and long and have kind of a three-dimensional shape and light to them, and they also protrude a little farther into the rear quarter panels. But the outside is not what's significant and what's changed. The old X5's interior was of high quality, but kind of simple. There weren't a lot of standout luxury features or really nice materials that would make you go, wow. That's changed for 2019, although some of it is optional. This X5 has the optional glass hardware, not crystal. Volvo, it's glass. It's on the gear selector, it's on the start-stop, and it's on the volume control as well as the center dial controller. It's a nice little bit of flash, pizzazz, and then on the gear selector, the X lights up. There are available heated and cooled cup holders, which are not new. We've seen these in Chrysler products a few years ago, and they work about the same there. It's a really steamy day today, and this ginger beer, not real beer, is reasonably cool. And on our hour-long commute today, the coffee in a paper cup stayed relatively warm. Not hot, but drinkable. Some cars like the XC90 have switched to a touchscreen to integrate a lot of controls. In the X5 though, there are still a lot of physical knobs and dials, and they're covered nicely in materials and textures that add a lot of character to the interior that I don't think you get when you go to a complete touchscreen system. BMW is settling on a very good multimedia system integration. I call it multimedia system, but it's really just a vehicle control interface. It's a lot more than just changing the radio station. So you have your primary controller here to navigate the system. It's something you'll be used to if you've driven older BMWs or other luxury cars, but there's also a touchscreen. So, you know, automakers can put everything in the touchscreen and we don't like it, or they put everything in the buttons and we don't like it. I feel like this is a good compromise. If you don't like using the controller, you can use the touchscreen. If you don't like using the touchscreen, you can use the controller. And it gives you options. You don't have to use all of them, but you have options. Like, there are 3 ways to change your radio station. You can use the steering wheel to change radio station. You can use the track change button over here, or you can use gesture control. One of the unique features in the center display is the 3D view function. Now, more than just a backup camera and even more than just a 360-degree top-down view, this is a ground level view of the X5 that's viewed 3-dimensionally, and you can follow around the vehicle, you can move it and see what's around the car, and it works really well. This is not the only big screen in the car. The gauge cluster is also fully digital. The display does everything pretty well, but I wish it was more customizable, or it would change in the sport modes. It'd be nice to have a large tachometer for when you're in Sport Plus mode. But overall, it has a pretty well laid out digital display. It's very sharp, it's very easy to read, and just a little more customization, especially because digitally you have infinite customization, would have been a nice little extra step. An optional third row will be available in December 2018, but we tested the 2-row model. And that back seat is roomy with good leg room, thigh support, head room. but there's no adjustability, so it doesn't slide fore and aft and it doesn't recline. When you do opt for the third row model, you will get that electric sliding second row, but in the 2-row, you have this back seat that folds flat, but doesn't have any other adjustability. The cargo area is flat, it's wide, it's deep, and you can fold the second row through release handles in the cargo area. You can also take advantage of the optional air suspension when you hit a button to lower the rear for easier access. The back end drops to the ground and you have a much lower load-in height. And you're going to need that because the split tailgate carries over for 2019. And an optional package includes power open and close for the top part of the tailgate and the lower part of the tailgate. There's also a hands-free option. The lower tailgate does extend the cargo area out a little farther, but it does make digging for cargo items in the very back near the back seat more difficult. If you have an X5, this is no news to you, but if you don't, this might be something to consider if you're used to a typical tailgate without that bottom section folding. The interior is much snazzier than before, but how does it drive? Well, there are 2 engines available in the X5 for 2019. In the US, we get a 335 horsepower turbocharged 6-cylinder, and we get a 462 horsepower twin turbocharged V8. I'm driving the xDrive 40, which is the 335 horsepower 6-cylinder. Now, BMW says this new model does 0 to 60 in 5.3 seconds versus 6.1 seconds of the old car. And I think some of that has to do with the launch control. Launch control is kind of an odd feature to have on this car. 1, it's not the V8. 2, it's not even the M Sport edition. This is the X line, which is the more luxury-oriented trim level, and it has launch control. So launch control is Sport Plus mode, stability in Sport traction, and the gear selector in Sport mode. Hold the brake, hold the gas, let off the brake, and go. Our car is equipped with both the optional air suspension and 21-inch wheels. Now, Cars.com owned a 2016 Volvo XC90 for a year. We put 22,000 miles on it and spent a lot of time in that car. It had an optional air suspension and optional 21-inch wheels, and this car rides so much cleaner. Road isolation is better. There's not as much harshness over bumps. The highway ride is fantastic, and it's overall just a much more sophisticated riding car than that XC90. The X5 also outdoes the XC90 as far as engine noise. So the XC90 has a turbocharged and supercharged 2.0 liter 4-cylinder, and it was grainy sounding and it's not the best luxury experience. It just sounded more like an economy engine than a luxury car engine. Well, the X5 with its turbocharged 6-cylinder has a nice hum to it. And of course it's augmented by electronic noise inside the cabin, but it's not that noticeable. It has a very nice tone to it, and on the highway it is near silent. Accelerating, you don't get that graininess, you get a nice smooth hum, and that combined with the better ride quality really makes the X5 the better driving car. The 40i's engine may be the entry-level engine, but it's delightful, and a lot of that is because it pairs perfectly with that 8-speed automatic transmission. The transmission is not a dual-clutch automatic transmission, but you could have fooled me if you told me it was. It shifts smooth, fast, and cleanly. So the shifts in the more comfort-oriented modes are nearly seamless, but when you get into the Sport and the Sport Plus modes, they are crisp and they are tight. And it feels like a much fancier transmission than what it actually has. The programming works really well too. When you're in that Sport Plus mode and you're driving these curvy roads, you step on the brakes and the transmission will rev match, downshift, and put you in that gear that you need to be in. Again, this is the entry-level engine and transmission package, and it's not even the M Sport package. And To get that kind of seamlessness just out of the everyday volume seller engine is mighty impressive. While this is the base engine now, I wouldn't be surprised to see more engine options in the future. The 40i and the 50i are coming first. There will be a plug-in hybrid later, and maybe you'll see a diesel at some point, maybe you'll see a 4-cylinder at some point, but when this car goes on sale later in 2018, that 40i will be the base engine. BMW's Driving Assistance Pro is their semi-autonomous driving feature that on the X5 is optional and keeps the car centered in the lane and pairs with a bunch of other systems to give you a more carefree driving experience in stop-and-go traffic. It'll bring the car all the way down to a stop, and it will resume and speed up to highway speeds, keeping the car, or at least the intended purpose is to keep the car centered in the lane with minimal steering interaction. It could be just the roads around Atlanta and how they're marked, but the car didn't stay centered in the lane very well. It bounced around, it wandered back and forth. If a feature like this interests you, it is optional on the X5. Definitely try it before you buy it on the roads around you. New for 2019 is an off-road package that we previewed through the muddy hills of western Georgia. The package includes the air suspension, a new electronic locking rear differential, front and rear skid plates, and an off-road driving mode with selectable terrain settings. The off-road package doesn't turn the X5 into a Jeep Wrangler. Its street tires aren't especially grabby, and like on the street, the steering isn't that communicative, so it made it challenging to find grooves with traction when presented with a muddy trail, like in our experience. The experience, while it was capable, wasn't confidence-inspiring. BMW has definitely added more wow factor to the X5 for 2019, but it does come at a price. The X5 we tested cost $81,000. Our XC90, where I made a lot of comparisons between the driving experience, that was a $66,000 car. So you ask yourself, is it worth it? That all depends on how much you value the driving experience, which is where the X5 gets top marks.